My guest today is Linda Rodriguez McRobbie. She is an editor here at Finimize. Linda, you've done such exciting things, whether it's at New Scientist, whether it's the books you've written, the podcasts you've hosted, the shows you've done. Just run everyone through a potted history and how you've landed here at Finimize.
That makes me sound really, really exciting. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I had been a freelance journalist for about 13 years. And in that time, I was really, really lucky to be able to pursue the kinds of ideas and thoughts and articles and projects that I wanted to do. Yeah. And I think that what I wanted to do was kind of everything.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of different things. I did a 2-year-long project investigating the police use of rubber bullets in America.
Wow.
I wrote a book about the experience of pain, along with my fabulous co-writer on that one. She's an American sociologist. She's fantastic.
Awesome.
I wrote a book about princesses and their sort of interesting history and stories and people who you wouldn't necessarily think of as a princess but are, and what they did. So the kind of through line, though, is that I've always just been really curious about a lot of things. And that's one of the things that I love about working at Finimize. Awesome. Is we have the opportunity to look at the world through the lens of finance, but with curiosity and with interest.
Awesome. That's exciting to hear. Can you maybe help us understand, how do you come to a story? How do you decide on the angle? How do you decide how to make something interesting? So, just to pick an example, rubber bullets, that feels politically charged, that feels quite academic, it can feel quite dry, or it can feel really extreme and you're trying to make a point. How do you decide where to land on that and how to take someone on a journey?
Well, with some of these stories, and the rubber bullets one is a really good example, because that ended up being about 40,000 words.
Oh my gosh.
It was a tremendous experience to be able to put this out there. We did a big interactive website. Mm-hmm. So we were able to explore this really, really deeply and through a lot of different angles. What I've generally found is that with most stories, you're led by the story. You're led by the reporting. You're led by the people that you talk to and the information that you get. And if you come into it with a sort of pre-existing idea of what you think it's going to be, oftentimes you're going to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I think sort of similarly, this is Finimize is a different animal, right? Like instead of 40,000 words, I've got 325 to talk about the most important story in finance of the day.
Yeah.
But it's kind of similar ideas. You start to shape something based on what information you have. You start to pull together and kind of mold it in a way where you're able to give the most important and the most interesting bits of this and the thing that people are going to want to take away and use. And that's led by our analysts who do tremendous work and are really thoughtful and are really thinking about things in interesting and useful ways, and what information we have, the facts. So,
and maybe let's spend a bit of time on that interaction between you and the analysts, because one of the things that we have in our style guide is earn your interest. And yes, it's a pun, but with 325 words, every word needs to earn its spot on the page. And, I often say to the analysts and to you and Karen, hey, this isn't an exercise in showing everyone all the things you know and that you're really clever. The way to show that skill and to show what you know is to be able to say, actually, of all these things, here are the couple of things that really matter, and let's spend time on those.
Yeah.
So can you maybe just share how that interaction works in practice?
So it does depend a little bit on the analyst that I'm talking to, because some of our analysts are amazing at finding links and pulling together information, and there's a lot, right? Yeah. But our job is to direct that sort of fire hose of information and really narrow it down and drill it down to the most important, most interesting things that we want to say.
Yeah.
And some of our other analysts are really good at sort of casting things about showing why this is important and how, and kind of putting it in the right tone so I can understand how to take this information, right?
Yeah.
So, different analysts, we have different kind of relationships of how we go and how we go on to form the story.
Yeah.
The thing that I think I bring is a relative lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
They know their stuff so well that sometimes they can make links that I just can't. And I can't. And if I can't follow along, I think our readers would struggle as well.
Exactly. I think that's by design. And so you need to be representative of the busy, ambitious investor who they'll give us 15 minutes a day. We've got to make it count. They're not going to do the work for themselves, and they're relying on us to do that work for them.
Oh, yeah. And I think we're even they're giving us 3 minutes and 15 seconds a day on the newsletter.
That's true.
And, so we've got it. Like you said, we've really got to make that count. And so when I'm reading something, if I trip over something, if there's a moment that gives me pause, I need to figure out how we either ease that and make it clear, or decide if it's really worth it to continue with and to go into.
100%. There's a ton there. And I think it's we have it as a mantra. I've heard other people do it around eating your own dog food. Mm-hmm. And when I look at a test email before it goes out, I'm generally looking at that alongside doing other things. And so if I can't get through something, I will stop everyone and say, hold on, we're not going to print. This isn't ready. This isn't right.
We've definitely had that experience before, for sure.
Sorry.
No.
But also not sorry.
Exactly. No, you shouldn't be, because this is exactly what we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is how we serve our users, how we serve our readers, is by making sure that we're clear and fun and engaging, but paramount clear.
Yeah.
That's got to be our sort of raison d'etre. That's got to be the reason why we exist.
Yeah.
And that we're offering something more than you would get from any of the other places that I'm not going to name check.
So let's get salacious, because you open that door. I'm going to push on it. Where, maybe in the world of finance, but maybe not, where have you seen, the opposite of everything that we're trying to do? Where does it go wrong? And if you're not going to name someone or something, why does it go wrong? What do you see going wrong?
I won't name names, but one of the things that I find quite a lot is the same piece of information, or the same casting of that piece of information used multiple times across multiple outlets. And what that says to me is that they haven't really thought about or digested what they're looking at.
Yeah.
And that so then becomes this sort of gospel that may or may not actually be true. And so I think one of the things that I've pushed our analysts to do, and that we do quite a lot of, is investigating those claims a little bit. Because we'll say something, they'll say something, and we'll look at it and be like, well, is that, have you actually thought about what you've just said? Does that actually make sense based on the sort of context and everything else that's happening? So we see a lot of outlets repeating the same not quite accurate stuff.
Absolutely. I'd love to get people's views, maybe in the comments, of which outlets they think you might be talking about. My bugbear, since we're on the topic, is causal. This happened because of that.
Yeah.
And it drives me mad. And I've interviewed journalists, editors, and they just resort to that, and I just think not only is it wrong, you're proving you don't know what you're talking about. Well,
and it's a massive scientific principle, right? Causation is not correlation. So it's something that we do tend to do, right? It's a bias. We want to kind of attribute some sort of reason or structure or schema to something, so there has to be a cause and effect. But that's not always the case.
Exactly.
And so being in a position to investigate that and look at it, and then come up with okay, well, what does this actually mean, is important and nice.
Yeah. I've got to ask you about AI.
Yes.
Is it coming for your job?
I'm at, you tell me. You gave me my job. Tell me that. I think not so
Good.
far. I definitely don't think so far. Although, some of the data that we're seeing today, Cisco, for example, is cutting a bunch of jobs because of AI, despite the fact that it's doing well because of AI. So it's a little the hand that gives. And
yeah.
But I think for me personally, I hope not. I do think at this point, there are a lot of risks associated with AI, and particularly with the flattening of voice that happens with AI. And so fighting against that, struggling against that is something that we can continue to do as an outlet, right? Is to make sure that we're not allowing, AI is a tool, and it can be very, very useful. And especially when it comes to sort of trying to understand or fact check or, get a kind of, especially if you ask it for sources, always ask it for sources. Yeah. Get an overview of what's happening in a kind of quick way, like that's very useful. But it's really important to not rely on it and not rest on it in a very sort of it can be, it's a little worrying.
It sounds like a pretty balanced view. I find I'm hypersensitive to AI words, and what I find quite entertaining is that people who aren't as immersed aren't as sensitive to them, and so they use those words with a straight face without any sense of irony. And I'm just like, you as a human being have never used ship analogies or water analogies as often as you have now, and why is everything being sharpened, and why is everything, it's like the M&S of AI. It's like, it's not this, it's synonym for this.
But it's also like, the reason why AI uses it is because people did use it or do use it. So then it just becomes this sort of like, it's like my kids, they think everything is AI. So my kids are teenagers and they are acutely sensitive to like any sort of like changes in the current of sort of social life and everything. But any picture, any words, any story, anything, they're like, that's AI. That's AI slop. And they're like, and they want nothing to do with it.
Oh, that's interesting.
They are like, it's an interesting sort of generational shift.
The pendulum will inevitably swing.
There's going to be sort of like a Luddite movement to like.
Yeah, it's interesting that it could be generational rather than economically cyclical.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to investigate. Now, obviously, I only have like a data point of 2, maybe 3 if we count some of the other kids. But, there does seem to be an inherent dislike of AI slop. And so that makes me very wary about where it pops up and how we use it. And, so like your AI tells, for sure, it is really, really useful. Yeah. Although there have definitely been times where like you've said that I've had an AI tell and I was like, that was me. Actually, that was me.
Okay, fine.
The one time.
Like I said, I'm hypersensitive.
But we should be, right? Like we should be sort of on guard, because this is also an area that is important for humans to do and to keep doing.
Yeah. So switching gears, distribution. In my last conversation, I spoke to Chris Sullivan from Craft and Capital, and we were talking a lot about how not that long ago we could get an ETF issuer on Barron's and CNBC, and that's distribution done. Off you go. And there's obviously been a proliferation of channels, of media types, of ways to access that media. You can't just assume that once you've published it, it's done, it's out there, and people will receive it. I guess, what's your view on all of that change? And I guess more excitingly, where do you think the puck is going?
It's been interesting. So I've been a journalist for more than 20 years now, and when I went to journalism school, way back in the day, the program had just started to offer new media, and that was websites.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was, people didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And I think that was sort of writ large over the entire industry, that we didn't know what to do with this thing. And we didn't know how to monetize it. We didn't know how to shift from a model where we had people buying newspapers and the primary driver was advertising. You could reasonably say, we've got a distribution of 300,000 people, and this will, your ad will be in front of them, and that's how we make our money.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore. Like Correct. None of that's the case. And at the time, even, we were in these sort of like paroxysms of change. It was just, there was just so much happening, and no one was prepared.
Yeah.
Right. And now we're in sort of a similar shift in that there's just so much.
Yeah.
And so trying to get people's attention, like you've got to kind of figure out where people live and what you can offer them in that place. in order to keep their attention. So like newsletters are kind of great, right? Because you've got an audience that's already engaged. Like they've already like gone through the first hoop, which is clicking please send me this free email.
Yeah.
And then you are potentially getting their attention every day in some fashion. But there are so many other channels and ways to try to leverage that. So on the one hand, it is a bit terrifying.
Yeah.
But on the other, there are so many more options and so many ways to engage with people.
Does that mean that someone should be everywhere all at once, or pick 2 or 3 and maybe pick one and nail that?
So it definitely depends on who you are, but I think for us specifically, and I would say more generally, pick a lane and stick with it.
Okay.
Pick a way to maybe a few places that can leverage interest in some other ways. Like pick lanes that complement each other for sure. So we have our presence we have our newsletter. That's like we've gotten a lot of people into the lobby. How do we get them into how we sell tickets and get them into the theater kind of thing.
Gotcha.
We also have other channels that might be more sort of natural fits, like LinkedIn or Substack or any of the kind of social channels that we could use to complement what we already have.
Yeah.
But it is about finding where your audience lives and meeting them there, rather than assuming that they're just going to come to you.
Very fair. Very fair. Podcasts are a massive channel in that mix we were discussing, and tons of growth there, tons of interest, tons of competition. Mm-hmm. How would you think about shaping a podcast for retail investors, given the competition? How do you go about being a destination people want to return to?
Mm-hmm. So I think there's a couple different ways. One is telling a story that they haven't heard before.
Okay.
And I think that something like, like the sort of OG is like the Freakonomics podcast, right?
Love it.
Yeah. I mean, it is the best. And there's a reason why. And that's because sometimes it tells a story that you already know in a new way.
Yeah.
Sometimes it tells a story that you hadn't thought of before, but it always brings something new and unexpected and gives you a new perspective on the world.
Yeah.
That you hadn't considered before.
Yeah.
So, it's one of the best. It also helps that they've all got great voices and they do really great, they're fantastic production values. But the other way is to draw people into the conversation. Mm-hmm. So, having a conversation like this and having a couple people, 2 people, having someone who knows more about the topic than you do, that brings people in.
Yeah.
And it creates an environment where you're learning and they're learning. So I think one of the key things and one of the things that I love the most about listening to people talk about stuff is when the host or the sort of representative of the listener is doing a really good job of asking the questions, following along, doing the thing that you would want to have done as the member of the audience, so being that conversational partner, and drawing out the interesting stuff.
Gotcha.
So inviting listeners to be part of that experience, and crafting it in such a way that it is open is, I think, probably the best and kind of most key way of building that relationship with your audience.
That's fantastic insight. I'm now going to ask almost the opposite question, because if I dig deep in my own past, I was once an equity research analyst. And when I looked at retail and e-commerce stocks, the thing that I'd come up against is, well, I go to shops, therefore I know this industry too. And I thought, maybe you do, but not as well as me. And then something you no doubt come up against is, well, I can write a sentence, therefore I'm actually a journalist in disguise and I could do this better than you. And that's obviously not the case. But we have tons of conversations where financial services firms of all stripes and sizes will say, well, I'm a content creator too, and I want to have a podcast too. And I guess what would you say to them? Is the answer don't, or is it
give it a go?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit of, find out. Like,
Okay.
Because I think there is a sort of natural selection involved, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
people are going to like the stuff that they like. They're going to, the things that they can engage with, things that they like, that's going to kind of float to the top. So, give it a go, try, see what happens. And if it doesn't work.
The massive risk is a sort of Fraser Monroe talked about this a few weeks ago, the sea of sameness, right? Yeah. There are only so many things in the world that happen that allow you to talk about something that people don't know about. There are a finite number of experts at any one time. The edge that you think you might have may not exist. And the bigger the institution, almost the bigger the problem. Because just to pull out another conversation with Andrew Rummer, companies are full of really interesting, really exciting data. There are stories to tell. They are terrified of telling it. Yeah. And so if you get in front of a mic, but you're not willing to, open the curtain and share something, and you are just, rehashing the headlines from somewhere else or discussing something from 2 months ago that's no longer relevant, you're on a hiding to nothing.
I think some of it is also like who you're putting out in front.
Yes, for sure.
And because some people are better at talking about stuff than others.
Yeah.
I mean, we sort of like the give good quote, like when I interview people and back when I was a freelance journalist, my job was to draw those stories out, right? Yeah. And to draw those conversations out. And when I've done podcasts and when I've done interviews on camera and things like that, you want to have a good sparring partner. You want to have a good person to bounce off of and have that kind of conversation and the back and forth and to be able to draw that out. Now, some of it is in the skill of the interviewer, but some of it is who you choose to put in front of the mic.
Have you ever had a half cash, half stock moment?
like eBay's offer? Yeah. Yes, I'm sure. That was wild.
That was nuts.
That was my favorite story of last week. That was
amazing.
Like, it was just sort of inexplicable. And the fact that it got as much attention as it did.
I mean, I went round for days saying half cash, half stock to anyone who'd listen. I was like a kid going 6'7", but with half cash, half stock.
That was an unhinged moment in some ways. Like, but I also love that, like, I mean, we're talking about the GameStop thing.
Yes.
Just so that everybody can follow at home. But like, I loved that moment too, because it was entertaining. And it also sort of says a lot about like where we are in the world right now, especially with regard to tech stocks, especially with regard to meme stocks, things like that, so it's like, that was a great opportunity to sort of have a whole conversation about, it was a teachable moment in some ways.
Indeed.
It was. I think that gets at some of the value that we bring. Right? Exactly. Being able to contextualize the stories and contextualize what people are seeing in a way that brings it home, makes it sensible, and makes it interesting.
I want to come back to something you touched on earlier, which is sort of your role as representing the reader, the listener, the person on the other end of the content. And my observation is that a lot of the financial services industry writes for the retail investor as a single monolithic being. That's not the reality. I guess, how do you hold the multitudes of people that coalesce around this definition in your head, and what can the industry learn from your approach?
So there's a couple different answers to this, and they're all true.
Okay.
One is that as an editor and as a reader, I think maintaining curiosity is probably the most important thing, and that will, I think, enable a broader view that allows you to sort of encompass multiple viewpoints. Just remaining curious, asking the question rather than coming up with a statement first, kind of thing. The other thing that we also have is we have a fantastic team. So there's Karen, there's Haley, and they're the analysts, and we all have a role in the process in such a way that there are moments where I might not see something and Haley does. Yeah. And that, or Haley sees something that I don't, or that Karen sees something. So having enough people with eyes on this, we kind of can do a better job of representing kind of more readers. Yeah. More people, because you're right, like there isn't a single retail investor. Like that's that would be an absurd thing. That'd be like saying like there's a single voter and that's the kind of person that they are. Like that's not possible. So I think the sort of two main things are maintaining that curiosity so that you can continue to ask questions and even consider your sort of like opposite viewpoint, to always kind of be looking beyond what you've assumed. And just having a great team.
Awesome. Linda, this has been absolutely fantastic, eye-opening. One last question before I let you go. Is there something that's been rattling around in your head that you want to write and you're thinking about? Or is there something that you've read recently and you thought, damn, I wish I wrote that?
I think there's a lot of things, especially as an editor right now. There's a lot of things that I read and I think, damn, I wish I wrote that. But in terms of things that I'm working on, I want to be working on, there's a story that I've been wanting to write for years now about sports psychology and aging athletes. So I realize it sounds like really left field, but I do a lot of sport and I'm old. So like those two things have come together in a way that I think is very interesting. Right now we're in a place where people are living longer and living healthier for longer. And that's expanding what we think is possible for not only how we age generally, but how we age as athletes. So that's been one that like I've been working on and thinking about and have wanted to get off the ground for a little while now.
That's interesting. It might not seem like it, but there's a Venn diagram with Finimize pro investors in that successful athletes have a process, successful investors have a process. There's a ton of psychology around behavioral investing, not selling at the bottom, the discipline around processes and so on. So there is a guy that I follow who he's a fantastic coach and he's written a lot of really interesting stuff about sports psychology, but so much of it I read and I think that actually applies to some of the things that we do here and some of the things that we're thinking about. Certainly things about like confidence and expectation and how expectation can dictate performance and all of that stuff. So I also am of the mind that sort of everything is linked, everything is kind of relatable in some fashion. So it doesn't surprise me that there's going to be a bit of a Venn diagram. Well, that's a fun note to end on. Linda, thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.